Perfect. Live on Facebook. You see it on yours? I'll check. Great. Live on Facebook. You're going to need this somewhere. You go ahead. See it on yours? I'll check. Okay. Great. Live on Facebook. Oops. You're going to need this somewhere. You go ahead. See it on yours? I'll check. Why didn't it say? Hello? Yeah, it's fine now. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Professor Tom Haidu, and I am part of a new festival called The Art of the Possible. And tonight we have an event from Creative Revolutionaries and Art of the Possible, focusing on three areas. We've got three speakers tonight who will be sharing some of their ideas and insights as part of the Creative Revolutionaries series. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that we are on Garner land, and I want to pay respects to elders and leaders from the past, present, and future. It's my pleasure to invite you all to this series, and I think we just kick it off with Grayson Rotama. Grayson, why don't you kick it off and give us a little presentation on Indigenous music?
Thank you, Tom, and welcome, everyone. I'll just switch over into PowerPoint land here. Okay, can you guys see that? Can you guys hear me out there?
Yeah, we can hear you, but we can't see your PowerPoint screen.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, guys. So, first things first, I'll just do a quick acknowledgement of country as well. I'd like to acknowledge that we are taking place for this event on Kaurna land, and also would like to acknowledge elders past, present, and future. My name is Grayson Rotama, and I'm from the Bundjalung community from the Gold Coast, and I currently work at CASM, which is Centre for Aboriginal Studies in Music. CASM began in the 1970s and was created by Professor Kath Ellis, who empowered Indigenous people through music. She focused on knowledge centres within music and spent a lot of her time invested in Inma and Jurukupa, which is the Anangu song and dreaming. So today's topic, I thought there'd be a couple of categories that we could talk about around CASM and how innovative the program has been in terms of progressive music, etc. So one of the questions is, what is Indigenous music? What is contemporary Indigenous music in South Australia? And how do we maintain culture? So first question is, when we think of Indigenous music, what comes to mind? What is it that comes to mind when we think of Indigenous music? Let me ask you, the question is, what do we talk about when we talk about European music? The question is so incredibly broad because of Europe's many countries and cultures and historical traditions. So with Indigenous music, we can ascertain if there are commonalities that are shared by all Indigenous nations. Here is the Indigenous map of Australia, which celebrates over 250 nations. There are some common threads between the 250 nations. There is use of traditional language, the renewing and the teaching of law and culture, the ceremony, storytelling, instruments, songlines, moieties, skin names, etc. So there are a lot of common commonalities across our 250 nations, but we still cannot call this all one Indigenous music. In more recent forms of Indigenous music, there is a more overt social political agenda that is embedded within the new forms of music. Most of these bands have a socio-political agenda or language and cultural elements embedded within it. Some artists, such as Kid Laroi, Jessica Mauboy, don't overtly use cultural elements, but identify as Indigenous artists. This list here I've put together is a bird's eye view of the NEMAs, which is National Indigenous Music Awards, and it's a reflection on what's happening across our country in terms of Indigenous music. It also demonstrates the diversity, but also the commonalities that we are discussing. AB Originals, Baker Boy, Jimbla, Birds, Kid Laroi, they are all hip-hop and rap artists and producers. Excluding Kid Laroi, all these bands assert a very strong socio-political agenda. Here is another snapshot. We have Thelma Plum, Birds, hip-hop artist, rapper, Dan Sultan, Jessica Mauboy there, and Bangara Dance Company, which all in some way and in some elements utilise all these songline traditions, these elements and cultural contexts from their own communities. One would argue that Jessica Mauboy, who strongly identifies as an Indigenous musical artist, doesn't reflect strongly or overtly in terms of language and cultural instruments, or even painting and symbolism, but strongly still identifies as an Indigenous artist. So, some iconic pioneers. If we are going to talk about where music is going from a progressional point of view or an evolutional point of view, it's important to talk about where these artists in fact came from. Our iconic pioneers such as Archie Roach there, Bunna Laurie, No Fixed Address, who have just been given a name in Old Frundle Mall, and the amazing and prolific singer-songwriter Kev Carmody. So what strings and ties all these artists together is the telling of Indigenous experience to the wider community, the celebration of Indigenous culture, commenting on life, society and politics, showcasing and sharing Indigenous experience through a collaborative writing and performance recording, and also sharing Indigenous experience with audiences in Australia and from a global perspective. Here we have a few artists that were quite progressive at their time that emerged out of Chasm. Bangara Dance Company with the Page Brothers, Pigram Brothers, No Fixed Address, Coloured Stone, Us Mob, the first orchestral piece by Indigenous Australians, and Urban Corroboree. So while you can rip this to pieces and start talking about the different elements that did manifest out of those particular elements of Chasm, one thing that I will talk through now about what changed and evolved the songwriting and progressive nature of Indigenous music happened when Bob Marley visited Adelaide. The 1970s saw a turning point in Australian Aboriginal music. Since Bob Marley's visit to Adelaide, his global incursion of reggae had invigorated popular music of Aboriginal Australia behind a global reggae movement. Was Get Up Stand Up a political and social call inciting Indigenous Australia to in fact stand up? Was I Shot the Sheriff a resonating factor in rebelling against a systemically racist Australia? Was No Fixed Addresses We Have Survived, Us Mob's Genocide or Coloured Stone's Black Boy the catalyst for all Indigenous Australian songwriters to bear arms with reggae rock-influenced political statements? The 1970s film Wrong Side of the Road had a compelling depiction of discrimination of Aboriginal community and Marlin and RKM Ellie Lovegrove. So these ones here are fairly important because they did come out of this community and out of Chasm. But Zachariah Fielding was the 2020 Live Voice of the Year for Australia. In 2019, we had the Eurovision Song Contest contribution called 2000 and whatever. In there, Glenn Scoothorpe, prolific singer, country singer-songwriter, and Tilly Thomas, an emerging indie artist whose songs are written about her Ngunnawal heritage. Nathan May, multi-talented singer-songwriter who descends from the Arabana Marijaban clans. Some other more progressive elements that come out of the program. You can see the top there's Ellie Lovegrove with Red Fruit from the Voice and X Factor, Simi Vuatu. These artists, who strongly identify as Indigenous artists, obviously had to follow a formula inside the Voice and X Factor. They are all cover songs, but who strongly identify as Indigenous artists. We've got Marlon MK, who are a hip-hop and rap artists playing on stage at WOMAD, but more socially and politically driven song form and structures. So what we're talking about here is the special nature of Indigenous music and how do we maintain that culture. Renewing and teaching law and culture is really important. Ceremony, storytelling, preserving language is also important. Recording stories that are common to Indigenous Australian experience. So we're talking about here about colonialist interactions and influence of colonialism on Indigenous music making. They do comment on life, society and politics, and it's still all about showcasing and sharing Indigenous experience through a collaborative writing and performance recording. Some of the other main things and important things around respecting culture and Indigenous music making, to be progressive and evolve, we have to pay attention to some of the protocols, or all of the protocols in fact, that go along with dealing with sensitive material. So this slide is a very condensed overview of the Australia Council for the Arts 9 protocols, but it is designed to ensure ethical conduct and producing Indigenous Australian music. While it's not possible to prescribe universal rules for engaging with Indigenous musicians and their communities, there are some fundamental principles within which to conduct respectful work. So what I would like you to do is just have a look further on those protocols, which are in the Australia Council for the Arts. They're very, very in-depth description on how these come to play across all kinds of projects and works. Speaking of those works, here is Pudnanthi Padnanthi 2011. So these are some projects that we managed to get through this year in South Australia and Chasm. So Pudnanthi Padnanthi, fortunately I was involved in the consultation process for the development of Pudnanthi Padnanthi, which simply means the coming and the going. It was composed by Ghana songmen Jack Buckskin and Jamie Goldsmith and commissioned by the ASO. And it is seen as a new Ghana acknowledgement of country, which is being played before major works of the ASO. Another piece that I was fortunately enough to be commissioned with this year is Bula Yabru. It's an orchestral work that I composed with Luke Harold. the focus of this piece is creating a new vehicle for traditional knowledge. So stay tuned for the premiere next year, I hope. So, what is Indigenous music? Going back to our first question, well, from what we've had a look at today, and again, this is a very, very tight, snapshot of what's happening, but it's a wide diversity of musical styles and genres and modes, and it's a means of expression. It's performed in a wide variety of settings and forums. It's from the rural and the remote locations. It's from towns and cities. Indigenous music is from traditional ceremonial music and dance to new and emerging styles that do include genres such as fusion and hybrid forms of country music, rock, reggae, jazz, musicals, orchestral music, opera, incidental music for film and dance. It's vocal and it's choral forms. It's rap, it's hip hop, and it's electronica. To close today's special on the nature of Indigenous music, I'm going to play a song from one of the alumni of Chasm. These guys started writing about songs from the APY lands and drawing upon the Jurko Par and Inma. But Zachariah has been known to be talking about celestial song forms and how to transform that spirit of the performer into the celestial body. And I'm going to play this one for you to end. So 1 minute. Here it is. This song was part of Eurovision contribution. Can you guys see this?
Oh, thank you very much, Grayson. That's really interesting. Uh, you've given us a really interesting description or of an array of ways in which indigenous music is unfolding and has been unfolding now. What do you see as some of the future opportunities for Aboriginal music?
Well, I think definitely with the 250 nations that are currently active and growing and evolving as we speak, there is a lot more Indigenous content that hasn't been untapped, that needs to be untapped. Language is also, a huge one that's happening for the next 10 years. It is the decade of endangered languages. Starts next year. So I think there's going to be a lot more movement around that area. I also think that, when speaking to people like Zachariah, he's talking about having festivals up on country where there is no English.
Hmm.
And, I think as far as going towards immersive music and immersive education systems, I think that's probably the new zone.
Hmm. Very, very interesting. Thank you. So, let's shift now from the future of indigenous music to have a presentation by Jamie Shera, who works at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning and is also part of the Art Intelligence Agency, a new initiative focusing on artificial intelligence and art. So, Jamie, maybe you can talk a little bit about the future of art and AI.
Sure thing. Thanks, Tom. Just share my screen. Let's see. Can you all see that? All good. Hi, I'm Jamie, and Jamie Shera, and I work at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning. A lot of you may not know that Adelaide is home to a world-class institute for artificial intelligence. So machine learning is part of our artificial intelligence research, and it's ranked third in the world for computer vision by publications. And it's located at Lot 14, and it's part of the University of Adelaide. And for a couple of years now, we've been working on machine learning and in art and using it to produce art and things like that. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about that work. So we have at the University of Adelaide the Art Intelligence Agency, and the idea is that we're working with artists potentially from around the world to try to combine artificial intelligence with art, whether that's using AI to create art or as a tool that artists can use to create art. And we're going to display these works online and in live exhibitions. So what about AI and art? So everybody knows that artificial intelligence is used for things like robotics and speech recognition and recognizing images and things like that. It can also be used to generate images. And people might think, well, can AI be creative? So AI can be analytical, but can it be creative like a human is creative? So the answer to that is yes and no. It can be creative, but perhaps not in the same way as a person is creative. But certainly it's being used. It's being used a lot with imagery. So in this picture, we can see the famous sale in 2018 of an AI-generated portrait that sold at auction for a large sum of money. And how was this produced? So a computer algorithm was shown thousands of past portraits from different famous painters in history from different styles, and then used to generate new portraits. And you can just generate random seed that each portrait will be different. And it's kind of like you're making a little brain that just knows about portraits. And then each portrait you generate is like a dream or an imagination from this tiny brain. So this is what we call narrow AI, that at the moment we have algorithms that kind of do one task quite well. So there are many examples of this using machine learning to create imagery, for example, to render a photograph in the style of a famous painter, or to generate new pictures like this, or you could provide a text description and it would produce a picture that looks like it. But at the Institute of Machine Learning, we've focused on other forms of art, particularly to do with natural language or text. And something we started out doing just for fun was using machine learning to generate self-help tips. And we put that bot on Twitter. It's called Freud AI on Twitter. This came about because around 2018, there was an innovation in a field called deep learning or deep neural networks, where these networks called transformer networks were trained on very large amounts of text data from the internet. And basically, it's a model that can generate language. We give it a prefix and it will complete the prefix and produce very sensible looking on the surface of it and syntactically correct text like a person would have written it. So we can write something like, life is about, and then have the model complete that, for example. Like life is about, and then the artificial intelligence has generated the rest of the text. And this has been trained on similar sayings to produce the kind of the thing that you would get in a daily self-help tip or something. Another thing we produced is an app called Art Snob, which is something that you can try at home. Sorry, I thought the URL was there. It's disappeared. And the idea here is AI is interpreting art, or rather interpreting a real world scene like it's art. So you can take a picture of, say, the cat on the chair and upload that, and then the app will generate an artist description underneath as if it was an artwork that somebody had produced. You can see some examples here, including the famous banana taped to the wall that came out, I think, last year. And you can see that, it seems something quite plausible that an artist might have written. It's talking about things that are in the image. And, it's like the artist is talking about their life or people who are in their life and what the artwork meant to them because of those relationships, things like that. So it has a bit of personality to it. And if you hit the regenerate button, it'll generate a new one that's totally different, or not totally different, but, could be about something quite different to do with the artist's life. And the way this works is the AI analyzes the image, tries to work out what's in the image, and then relates that to the text generator that's been trained on similar kind of artists' statements. So, we have some smart people at AML, and we know a lot about machine learning and algorithms and things like that, and we can produce apps like this. But I think really good art comes about from an artist where it really means something to them, and they have an idea to the artwork. It has some meaning. Maybe it has some meaning in the context of the history of art or in their life or something like that. And, while we can generate using machine learning within some context, we set it up to generate text, for example, or images with lots of variation. There'll be limited variations. So there'll be variations on that kind of theme or in that context, whereas, a human artist can come up with any idea at all, any framework, or bringing together different mediums or different ideas that, AI is not so good at the moment. So it's important for us, if we want to do quality work, to work with real artists. And we have, for the last year or two, been working with our artist in residence, Laurie Anderson. She's a renowned artist who lives in New York, and she has a long career in all kinds of art, particularly music. And she's very into tinkering with technology and creating new things, creating new instruments. And she's also very fond of literature and reads a lot, fond of stories, writing herself. And so it seemed a really good fit to work with her on machine learning to use natural language and words and stories. So the way that we've worked with her is to provide her with tools that she can use to generate art and come up with ideas and use them to do things. And then she'll come back to us and say, that. And even though she's on the other side of the world, that has been working fairly well. So one thing that we have provided her with is a lyrics and prose generator where we've trained it to generate text with a certain style, or with perhaps a combination of influences that determine the style. So in this app that you can see on the right, you put in a series of keywords. As you can see, they're written there: whiskey, lamb, magician, dress, slipping, haggard. So they could just be quite random, unrelated words. And then we've trained an artificial neural network to kind of fill the gaps between those keywords and create either a song or a piece of prose that has the style that we want. So in this case, we have trained the model to produce text in the style of something that, say, Laurie Anderson would have written, or Lou Reed, her former husband, or even a combination of the two where it sounds a little bit like Laurie and a bit like Lou. And so you can just keep hitting generate lyrics, or you can change the keywords and it'll just generate a new set of lyrics for a song. And so you can imagine you could use this in all kinds of different ways. You could take ideas from this song and ideas from that song and then combine them in your own way.
So Jamie, let me just jump in here. So what you're saying is that the neural net learned essentially how Laurie writes, in a sense, by feeding a bunch of text that Laurie has written in the past. And also then separately, another neural net learned how Lou Reed, learned essentially the input was Lou Reed's texts. And so now it's essentially mimicking their styles, or you can hybridize their styles, right?
Yes. Although we do use a separate model for the combination of them at the moment.
And that, as part of the art of the possible, you can play around briefly just for the next couple of days with these with this application. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So in a way, the AI has captured the literary voice of Laurie here. So you might have heard of deep fakes and AI being used to kind of impersonate people or make a video of someone that looks realistic. Here we're kind of doing a deep fake of her literary style, if you like.
Yeah, it's been interesting to get Laurie's feedback on this because Laurie came here just before the pandemic. We spent a bunch of time with her thinking about various projects that we could work on. And when Jamie started sending these applications to her, it was she was quite struck by the fact that a machine could essentially mirror back to her the way in which she writes. It was really interesting process engaging her in that.
Yeah, I think she was blown away by it. Here are some more examples of songs. So the song lyrics on the left there were generated for Laurie's style, and on the right for Lou Reed's style. And another thing we've done is we've added in rhyming. So tried to control the text generation so that you get some loose rhyming between lines. It's not strict rhyming, but we're kind of encouraging it to rhyme.
And that's quite hard to do, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And let me also add, because I know you went past that picture quite quickly, that Laurie was so impressed with this work that this work was represented at the Norton Lecture Series at Harvard in May, I think it was. And that's the first time Australian work has ever been represented at these lectures. The Norton Lecture Series is arguably the most significant historical series in the humanities in the world. So everybody from T.S. Eliot to Stravinsky to Aaron Copland has Leonard Bernstein, Maya Angelou have spoken at the Norton Lecture Series. Herbie Hancock, a whole series of luminaries. So it's pretty neat that this work has been represented there, and I think we're going to be also in August represented at the Norton Lecture Series again. I think, if I'm correct. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
No, that's a good point. Yep. Yeah, so that's what we're working towards at the moment, providing Laurie with materials she can use in her next lectures in October. Another example is where instead of putting keywords in, we provide an image, and then the AI tries to understand things from the image or an impression that's used to generate or influence the generation of a poem or lyrics. And here's an example here. So you can see that it does refer to a dog and it refers to grass, but not strictly, not literally. So still does have that artistic element to it. One interesting thing here is that there's limitations to this at the moment, that these models can produce text that looks real or natural, but it doesn't always represent meaning very well. It's that higher level meaning of text that humans put into the text that they make that is still something that's we're working on in the research field. I mean, I guess if AI could, fully control and understand meaning of text, then we would have solved general AI and we would all be enslaved by robots by now. So, so that's something we're still working on, and we're quite interested in as well in generating stories automatically or understanding stories and representing and manipulating the meaning of text. So this is still an emerging field in natural language processing. But for art, it does mean that it's a good match at the moment, because although sometimes the text might have a dreamy quality or the strict meaning is lost, that can still be good from an artistic point of view to leave it a little ambiguous or open for the reader to interpret. There's another example of generating lyrics or a poem from an image. You can see that it refers to graffiti in the text.
So let me just jump in here. Is that's one of Laurie's drawings, right?
It is, yes.
So that's a whole series of ironic recursive loops, right? Where the AI is now reading an image by Laurie in the style and coming back with a description in the style of Laurie as if she was looking at her own work. It's kind of interesting Borgesian.
Another thing that Laurie was interested in, she's had this theme recently of things I lost in the flood and flood stories, like the flood story in the book of Genesis in the Bible, Moby Dick, I guess, to do with water. And so she was quite interested in, could we use AI to interpret the Bible in new ways, or to give, a personalized interpretation or something like that. And we've tried various things. Something that we've landed on recently is producing a translation or paraphrase of Bible texts in the style of Laurie's voice again. It could be in another style, but we've tried with her style. So
actually, we've tried with several styles, but the Laurie style works pretty well, right?
yeah, so we can see a passage here. Here's the original on the top left. It should be familiar to lots of people from Book of Genesis, creation story. And then on the right is a version that's meant to be in Laurie's style. And the reason there are different versions here is in this app we gave her, I think we called it the crazyometer. Is that right? Yeah. Which is a slider where you can kind of change how random you want the translations to be. So as we go up to level 5, it's getting more crazy, and you can see that it's less and less related to the original and a bit more out there in the kinds of things that it's talking about. So
target is moving away from the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So going from a kind of a strict translation to something a bit more creative and new. So as I said, we kind of cloned Laurie's literary voice. We've also tried cloning her audible voice, which is something that you might have heard about in the press in the last couple of years, that people have used AI to be able to make some famous person say anything really by, you could put in text and it will generate a waveform that sounds like their voice. And we have some examples here. It might be a little hard to hear. Let's see if you can hear it.
She remembered the soya granules. She crossed to the cabinet and took down the box, and then caught the fridge door before it swung shut. In my wild, erratic, fancy visions come to me of Clancy.
So it has a few artifacts, and it's something we're still working on, but you can see that it does sound like her if you're familiar with her, and it means that we can kind of make Laurie say anything. This is a bit scary and creepy, but being a seasoned artist, she kind of likes scary and creepy a bit, so it's all good.
In my wild.
So then we went the whole hog, and we thought, well, can we have an animated talking head of Laurie where we've cloned how she looks as well?
Just a perfect day. Drink sangria in the park. And then later, when it gets dark, we go home.
So this is the clone on the right. That's a totally synthetic animation and sound of Laurie, where we just type in the text and then the video is produced of her saying that. And since we can also produce text that sounds like something she would have said, we could have it just, continually monologuing and being like a virtual Laurie. So this shows you a little bit about what's happening under the hood. We use computer graphics (3D) head, and then we use what's called a generative adversarial network to transfer this 2D image on the left to the 2D image on the right, where we've trained it with pictures of Laurie to generate pictures that look like Laurie. So this is not, in fact, a 3D model of her head on the right. It's a 2D rendition. And that's why you can get that realism with the hair and things like that. I'll just play it again.
Just a perfect day. Drink sangria in the park. And then later, when it gets dark, we go home.
So you can see it is a little in that uncanny valley where it looks not quite right and a little creepy, that her eye movements are unfocused. So these are all things that we're still working on, but I think she also likes that a bit, that it's clear that this is a doppelganger of her, and she's probably thinking about the artistic implications of that, or philosophical implications, and going to make something of that when she uses it. And that's all I have to talk about today.
Thank you, Jamie. That was really interesting. So we've heard from Grayson, the director of Chasm. speaking about indigenous music and the future then of indigenous music to the future or some possible futures of art and machine learning. And now I'd like to introduce John Colton, the director of the Andy Thomas Center for Space Resources. Grayson was referring to celestial songs in his talk. So John, I thought that might be a nice way to have you maybe talk about space and the opportunities going on there.
Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Yeah, those were both great presentations. When I talk about space, normally I think it generates quite a bit of interest, but actually I think this is probably the least interesting presentation of the evening. So, well done. Let's see. Okay, go on here. Can you see that slide yet? Yeah, okay. Okay, as Tom said, this is about Orion from the Andy Thomas Center for Space Resources here at the University of Adelaide. And sort of in keeping with a little bit of the theme tonight, especially what Grayson was talking about, even though the pictures on the screen might appear and the title of the center might seem very engineering, our center is actually focused on humans. So the purpose of the center is to support long-term human presence out in the universe. And the only way we can do that is to support them using the resources that we find as we take our walks, our first tentative walks into the solar system. So we have a huge component of what we do at the center. It's all about the social sciences and psychology, and we have an artist in residence at the center now. So it's all about the human experience, and the astronaut and the human is the focus of what we do at the center. But what I really want to convey tonight is that, especially for those who might be a bit older like myself, is that the next 50 years will not be like the last 50 years when it comes to developments in space. So we'll just go through some of this really quick, and this isn't meant to be to capture all of the great activities that are going on all around the world, but these are just some of the ones that I think are in the news. So, is this slide actually moving? No? Okay. I guess my computer's messing up tonight. But anyway, this is a picture of the Falcon 9 coming down in 2015, the first time it actually made its landing. And then only in 2018, we had a dual landing of from the Falcon Heavy launch. But SpaceX is, their goal is to help start cities on other planets. So you can't do that 4 people at a time. So they're building a much, much larger spacecraft called the Starship, and they're doing it on a beach in South Texas. And of course, the goal there, as recently endorsed by NASA, is choosing the SpaceX Starship to be the winner of the contract to put the first return humans to the surface of the moon in 2024, was the SpaceX Starship. But of course, SpaceX and Elon Musk, their real goal is to get to Mars. And once again, you need a big spaceship to do that. So it looks like my computer is, maybe it'll allow this to play. So our problem right now is we can't land anything larger than about a small pickup truck on Mars. We don't have the technology to do that. But SpaceX believes that they might have that technology, and they're showing that to you here in one of the recent Starship tests. So with this kind of entry and potential landing on Mars, you can bring up to 100 people. Each person could have a ton of their own luggage with them. And you can put, 100 175 tons or so of material potentially onto the surface of Mars, depending upon which version of this ship that you might end up using. And you can do it in a manner that's very accurate. So this is an order of magnitude change in how we think about going into space. But other companies are also doing interesting things. Blue Origin has a number of projects that they're working on, and here we can see sort of a family of SpaceX rockets. Here's some Blue Origin rockets that are in production. The Saturn V, that's famous from Apollo, and then the government rockets that NASA is building. And I might just say that these rockets down here are being made for something like 13 times less money than these rockets, and much, much faster. They can lift the same amount, but these rockets have 0% reusability, and these are 100% reusable. So when we talk about sustainability in space, our goal is to not have a single drop of wasted water or to produce any kind of a negative byproduct. Or if we do have a byproduct, it's an input for some other thing. So we want to be 100% efficient in space. And companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and others are answering that mandate. We have the ISS. We have a lot of commercial activities happening on the ISS. Axiom Space is building a module. They've already won this contract, and they've actually started construction. And perhaps Tom Cruise and a number of other folks are going up there to film the world's first actual movie in space. And there's a lot of other private flights that are already scheduled. And then Axiom will eventually build a free-floating station here soon. And NASA wants to be out of the business of owning and operating space infrastructure. They would rather be a tenant of this module here. This is the NASA module, and then over here is the Hilton Hotel module, and here might be the University of Adelaide module. So that's happening. Satellite servicing is happening, where we can dock with potentially broken satellites and continue and extend their service life. We have multiple type cargo modules. Here's an uncrewed cargo module heading to the space station. This is a orbital ATK Northrop Grumman. We've got a SpaceX Cargo Dragon, Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser. These are all, this should fly this year. Then we have crew transportation to the space station, Boeing's Starliner and the SpaceX Crew Dragon. We're building a big, huge spaceship around the moon called the Gateway. And it also has the Orion Command Module, which is a deep space transportation vehicle that's in production. Then astronauts might work from the station and control robotics on the moon, or dock here and then travel down to the moon. This is a mock-up of the SpaceX Deep Space Cargo Hauler that will provide cargo to that Gateway module around the moon. We've got 14 companies already approved by NASA to provide commercial lunar payload services. And then we had 3 teams competing in the commercial human lander services, and SpaceX recently just won that contract award. We have a rover going to the South Pole of the moon in 2023 to confirm the presence of water there. NASA is building another generation of the lunar rover. Our partners in the Japanese Space Agency have teamed up with Toyota to build a pressurized lunar roving vehicle where the astronauts can explore the lunar surface for up to 14 days. And then, of course, Virgin Galactic just made a suborbital flight last week, and Blue Origin will fly humans for the first time tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Adelaide time. You can watch that launch live. But of course, the goal here is to not just to do suborbital flights. Potentially both of these companies and SpaceX ultimately want to do point-to-point flights using the same technology, so that would provide a service, say, Sydney to London in 1 hour. So that's what the ultimate goal of these vehicles is. So as I mentioned, the point of all this momentum into space is for humans to go back to space, to explore, learn about the universe that we live in, learn about humanity itself. And part of that is best displayed when you think about the Dear Moon mission, which will be probably the first time humans have been back to the moon since the Apollo program. And that would be 9 artists, musicians, ballet dancers, photographers, actors going to the moon in 2023 on that SpaceX Starship. Because, of course, we can send robots into space, but it's more important, I think, to send humans because of what it means for us at multiple levels. But how do we get humans into space? We have to use the resources that we find there. And so that's what our center is working on. And what do we really mean by that? We're talking about life support, so air, water, and food, fuel, and building materials so that we don't have to have astronauts living in a tiny can. We can actually build something that's expansive and isn't soul crushing, living in a round tube. So the first place that we're probably going to go is the South Pole of the moon because of all this water that we know is there. The South Pole of the moon is a fantastic destination for us to go, even without the presence of water. But the fact that we do have water there in these permanent cold traps, these polar craters that never receive sunlight, and so their temperatures are extremely low, and so they're full of water. So this is the first place that probably most lunar missions are planning to go. This is the lunar South Pole right here, just to give some scale. There's that's Adelaide inside Shackleton Crater here at the lunar South Pole. So just in wrapping up, some of the things that we've been able to do here at the center in this brief year and a half is we have 2 payloads on the ISS working to better understand how medicine degrades in space. We need to make sure that astronauts there have access to medicines, and we need to understand how they break down in that environment. We have students over at Australian Institute of Machine Learning that are really doing a fantastic job. We're the only foreign-based team in the NASA Space Robotics Challenge. Adelaide hosts the Australian Rover Challenge each year in March. We're teaching courses. We have groups here that are led by scientists and engineers. We also have groups that are led by the professions examining issues around habitation. Just this week, our artist in residence started here at the center, and we're really looking forward to the collaborations that come out of that experience. So we'll have Jonathan Dady is here with us for this semester. And of course, we mentioned that we're trying to help build better houses. So we're making bricks out of lunar simulant, and that's a lot of fun. So thanks. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I know we're just about out of time.
That is really, really fascinating, John. So do you feel the role? I know that NASA has a couple of artists working with them with regard to thinking almost, well, lack for better description, outside the box strategically and how to get to Mars. Do you think that's going to be a trend in space where artists are going to be included more both in the psychological as well as not technological, but more kind of divergent thinking side? Is that a trend you see, or what do you think?
I think it is, and I think it's a fantastic the development that this first mission that sends humans to the moon, they won't land on the moon, but they'll go around it, is going to be packed with artists who can bring back and relate that experience to us in a number of different creative ways, right? So humans are naturally creative. So when we talk about bringing people up into space and to places like the moon, there are a number of constraints that have been removed, and so now we're just sort of waiting to see what people who spend a great deal of time on the moon, what are they going to create, whether it's new sports or new ways to dance, etc. So I think this is a pretty strong element that's going to remain in the space programs, certainly from our perspective. I think also from the government one as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you know if these other organizations, like the large industry-based organizations, are also starting to integrate some divergent thinking processes into their strategies. Is that happening as well? Are you familiar with that, or not?
I don't know at the companies, but I know that NASA has 6 artists in residence. So we took that as a good signal that we should have at least one.
Yeah, exactly.
In addition to Jamie and their project over there, yeah.
How long before we can float around and similar to Kubrick's 2001? Do you think? How many years before we're kind of just groups of people are hanging out, and not just in that one space capsule up in space? How long do you think?
Barring, I'm an optimist, so that's a little bit of my bias is towards things happening faster. But I think they're definitely, you can show that things are definitely speeding up. I think we've solved some of the technical challenges that will allow us to actually get up there and do it in a way that's cheap enough that it doesn't take large hegemonic governments are the only players, the only actors who can get to space. So I think that problem is rapidly being solved. And then, so you hear a lot about the democratization of space. That's going to unleash a massive flood of people that want to go. There's a lot of people that don't want to go, but like that Dear Moon mission, they received more than 1 million volunteers to join the Japanese artists who commissioned that. So more than 1 million volunteers for that. So I would say it'll be within the next 50 years. So it's going to be faster than we are used to.
Sure. Yeah, things are certainly accelerating. Look, I'd like to thank all 3 of you, John, Jamie, and Grayson, for participating in this quick fire Creative Revolutionaries Art of the Possible event. It really gives people around the world a snapshot of the kinds of things that are going on at the University of Adelaide. So I'd like to thank all 3 of you for sharing some of your thoughts. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you all in not digital reality soon. So thank you all, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you on another event soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, John. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. Okay, bye.